All right, well, want to welcome everyone to the March meeting of the Finance, Efficiency, Economy, and Sustainability Subcommittee. We'll start this meeting like we start all meetings of the subcommittee with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Waring, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I would be honored. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. Our first item today is the minutes of our February meeting of this subcommittee. I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have several items today, but wondering if my colleagues don't object, we'd like to take one item out of order. Item number 7, which is the Capital Improvement Project Procurement Protest Policy changes. Do any of my colleagues have an objection to taking that one out of order? Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and move on to that one. Good afternoon. I'm used to saying good morning at these meetings, but we're special afternoon meeting.
A little bit of a change. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm Keeney Knudsen, the city engineer for the street transportation department for the city of Phoenix. I'm up here with Julie Cree, assistant city attorney, and we're both going to be talking about an item that has come before this subcommittee previously. We were here in February to talk about the procurement policy changes regarding our CIP procurement, so the procurements that govern our design and construction procurements. We're looking at making some changes to our policy, our city code ordinance that governs our protest policy. And the subcommittee here asked us to come back with some additional information, and so we're here today to present that information as well as to provide a little bit of a summary of what we did last time. So without further ado, as I mentioned, this is an existing policy that we have in place. It's in Chapter 2, Article 12 of the existing city code. It hasn't been updated. Last time it was updated in 2007, and our last updates were to incorporate additional procurement methods that the state had allowed us and authorized us to do: construction management risk, job order contracting, and design build. And so that's what happened in the last changes in 2007. This time, we're going to be suggesting some changes more for efficiency's sake and some purposes of clarity with the policy. What those changes are is some clearer definitions we've got, some clarifications of the authority for me as the city engineer, what my part of this process, also and to be able to make some clarity of when we have protests come up, that we can treat them both informally and formally through a hearing process or without a hearing process. And also just a clear flow and structure for the protest policy to make it more chronological, a little bit more logical flowing for people who may be interested in protesting a city procurement dealing with CIP projects. One thing I would like to mention is that this is an administrative process, not a legal process. This is intended for us to have an administrative process for dealing with protest or procurement issues before they become before City Council for award or contract action. So what things have changed since the last time we were here in February? One thing we wanted to do is probably to give a scale, because we do have two major types of procurements in the city. We do have a CIP procurements, which govern the design and construction procurements, which we're talking about today, and also goods and services, your general goods and services types of procurements. And we wanted to kind of show the numbers when we're talking about the number of procurements we've had over the last few years, and also the number of protests we've had over the last few years. In general, we've had about 150 different procurements out there on the street in the last 2 years on the design and construction side. And of those, we've had about 6 protests over that period of time, about a 4% rate. If you look at that in comparison, we're about a third of the number of procurements that the goods and services procurements have, but their protest rate is about 5%. But that just gives you a little bit of a relative basis of how many protests we're actually talking about when we're talking about these policy changes. Additionally, we also did some engagement and outreach before the last meeting in February, but we had conducted additional outreach to make sure that we were covering everything that we needed to cover in the industry when we're making some policy changes here. We did some outreach with additional outreach with the construction community, both the Associated General Contractors of Arizona, and also the Arizona Builders Alliance. Those deal with the vertical and horizontal construction type projects that we have here in the state. Also with the American Council of Engineering Companies, the Arizona chapter here, who represents the engineering companies that we deal with on these types of procurements. I would say in general, their input has been neutral or positive. We did receive a couple different comments as we were going and drilling down with some of the membership. Some folks within the individual memberships of these industries, and we were able to incorporate actually some changes into the policy, not substantive changes, but really some changes that help clarify it for their purposes, and those were reflected in the report as well. I'll let Julie talk a little bit about the outreach that was done on the legal side as well, the folks we deal with on the protests that we generally deal with.
As you can see, we reached out to 3 different firms and a couple different people in each of those. A couple different people in each of those firms. We did receive good feedback. They liked the changes. They thought it made it more clear. We did make one minor change that we received from Fenimore Craig, a recommendation, and it was just a clarification on the days for allowed to make a protest on. There's different triggers, and they wanted to make it clear it was the earliest of whichever trigger. So we did receive the feedback. Another was just clarification of some of the policies. We reached out and talked to that attorney and clarified some of those issues.
So at the end, that concludes my presentation. We're seeking the support of the subcommittee, if possible, on our protest policy changes. And if the subcommittee is supportive of it, this will be coming before the formal meeting of the city council later to adopt these changes and incorporate them into the city code.
All right, well, thank you for that report and the additional outreach that you've done, which this subcommittee asked you to do, so I appreciate that. We do have a card from David Martin, not to speak, but available to speak if requested. Would you like to say anything at all about these proposed changes? Thank you for being here today.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Just want to let you know that AGC is in support of the proposal in front of you. But I'd like to dovetail it into something that I think is important for you all to know. I think the quality of work that was done here is something that we can take as a template to the state legislature. Believe it or not, we don't have a set protest policy for job order contracting, for construction manager at risk or design build. And I think the work that the staff has done here has provided an excellent opportunity for us to discuss this at a higher level. The other thing that the proposal does is it really puts nice and cleanly the process in chronological order, which we really, really appreciate. And so we appreciate the outreach that Kenny did to our organization and let you know that we're in support.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Any questions from my colleagues?
Thank you.
All right, thank you for being here. Any questions or comments from my colleagues, or additionally, would a motion would be germane as well?
Move to approve.
All right. Motion to approve in a second. Any comments at all? All right. Well, if there's no discussion, then all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much for your effort, and sounds like it might be of some assistance down the street. So appreciate it. Maybe again, if my colleagues don't object, maybe continue going a little out of order here and jump on to item 8, which is the Family and Medical Leave Act.
Whatever you want, Bill.
Okay, super. All right, come on down.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Blair Johnson. I'm the city's Human Resources Director. I'm coming back to talk to you to kind of close an earlier item that we came before this committee, which was with regard to the Family and Medical Leave Act. And the Human Resources staff came to you in the fall of 2015 with regard to looking at the process we would look at either internally or externally at managing the administration of this. So this summary provides you that update and some recommendations. Just to kind of recap some of the goals, the things that we're certainly concerned about as an organization, as an employer, is to be fair and consistent with our Family Medical Leave Act. We are looking as an organization to substantiate longer-term issues through recertification, simplifying the process for employees and for our supervisors, and also certainly improving visibility and reporting to our operating departments so they have a better sense of who's not at work, when they're due back, those kinds of things. Overall, obviously, an important part of this committee and what we're looking at is also reducing cost. And so that was one of the concerns and one of the focuses of the RFP. I just want to recap on the next item some recent progress so that you have, do I need to advance this? I apologize. Just recapped these for you. This is my inaugural at this committee, so you'll bear with me. So some recent progress, and then again, this is just to recap some things that we had talked about with the committee that we were going to do that we actually have done. So we have now, as an organization, centralized FMLA administration. That happened in January of 2016, so that has been completed. We came to this committee and talked about changing the tracking method. FMLA has various different options, and working with outside counsel as well as looking at other organizations, we looked at best practice, and that was adopting a rolling backward leave calendar. That is now in place and has been communicated. We also updated the FMLA policy for city operations. That was in January of 2016. We're now using a recertification requirement that's annual. Previously, that was every other year. So again, a little bit more attention to that. And then probably most importantly for this group, one of the things we also talked about was meeting with all of our labor partners to look at the solutions that were amenable to our employee groups, to operating departments and managers, our human resource practitioners. So we did all that before coming back, and that's what I'm going to go into now in terms of kind of some recommendations. So current status, just to kind of recap some of the important numbers. When the decision was made to centralize FMLA and human resources, the number I'd call your attention to is the $677,000 number. That's the equivalent or the value of the 9 positions that were centralized in human resources. So in our mind, that's the number that we want to benchmark against in terms of the costs to look at what's most effective. We did the RFP, again, to compare the costs of looking at internal versus external. We had 5 vendors respond to our RFP. We identified a subcommittee of labor partners, human resource, and department folks, brought that down to 3 semifinalists, and they presented on site. And then again, we're coming back here today with the recommendation on what that looks like. I won't review this each item, but this is just from the Professional Association of Society of HR Management. It's kind of a good benchmark to ask the question, should we as an organization be outsourcing? And you can see we really fit many of these categories with in terms of the size of the organization, the decentralization. We're obviously a service organization that operates across many departments. And really one of the goals here is to use technology and best practice to really streamline that process. So again, looking at what other organizations are doing in the time since we undertook this last fall, the city of Dallas, Texas is now looking at this same model following our direction. And Fulton County, Georgia is also looking at doing that. So we're starting to see some more activity in the public sector. This is certainly not uncommon in the private sector in terms of outsourcing this. So what I tried to do to kind of lay the options that were before us, and we wanted to come to you, were to create 3 lanes. And the far left lane is a centralized model. Obviously, we've already accomplished that, but keeping the work internal. The far right is an outsourced model. And the center is what I'm calling a hybrid model, and this is essentially the best of both in our minds. The pricing, again, on these 3 options, is most favorable in the center or the hybrid solution. It's a 5-year pricing agreement. One of the things that was very important to us with employees groups and with the labor unions is we didn't want any surprises when it came to contracting terms. We were a little concerned about any incentives or disincentives based on utilization. In other words, we didn't want to give the impression that we were going to drive down the cost by denying claims. If people have legitimate FMLA claims, we wanted to make sure they had the chance to avail themselves of that. So while some vendors had pricing reopeners or they had triggers that would change that, we really wanted to avoid that. And so as you can see in terms of kind of some of the pricing, The hybrid solution is a $197,000 annual cost. That's for the vendor relationship to manage all of our FMLA outsource. The reason we call it a hybrid solution is we're still the employer and we still have to have some involvement. And we think it's very important in terms of keeping our eye on that vendor relationship, but also connecting with our employees. So the hybrid is keeping some city staff still focused on FMLA, and that's that $200,000 cost. So what you see is the options, the outsource was the most expensive, and it was more than the $677,000 we talked about, so that wasn't an option on the right. The $650,000 option on the left, the internal, is not only more expensive than the other hybrid solution, but we don't benefit from the expertise that the vendor has, the systems, the infrastructure, the legal expertise. So the middle solution at $397,000 saves us about $300,000 or $280,000 a year in terms of that $677,000 cost. That's the hybrid solution. And then just to kind of recap, as I've got here. So the recommendation is the lowest cost solution, which is the hybrid solution. Again, it's a 5-year pricing guarantee, doesn't have any of the ties to pricing. One of the things that's very important to our employee groups, and I think our supervisors, is the simplicity of having one call so that we can administer and track that information. Again, it's a hybrid because it has this internal advocate or liaison piece. Those are also individuals that frankly can keep an eye on the contract, service level agreements, performance audits. Are we actually getting the value from the contract? And again, being there and being available for our employees. So next steps that we were asking for the committee is to recommend that we take this forward. It would be a contract with a company called ComPsych Corporation. Their operating business is FMLA Source. We'd like to recommend a contract to outsource that FMLA administrative services. It's about a 120-day implementation. And we would do joint training. One of the more important things we think is to do that with the labor partners jointly and with our departments. So we would do that in the later part of summer, looking at implementation towards September. Happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to give you that recap and ask for your support in contracting that out.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson, for that presentation. Questions or comments from my colleagues? Councilor Nowakowski.
So all cases aren't going to be handled by the individual that we have here as our local staff member, right?
Well,
It's just special cases?
no,
according to the
actually,
report?
one of the things we find actually is kind of the converse. So, the bulk of FMLA cases are fairly straightforward, and I always say that this is kind of the most black and white of the human resource body of work, when so much of it is kind of gray. So, for the bulk of FMLA cases, those will be handled centrally through FMLA Source because they really have the systems and the expertise. It is about 5% of the cases that really are the more complex ones. They're intermittent leave. They involve a bit more medical complication, and we need the vendor's support and expertise on that, but they require, frankly, a bit more hand-holding, and that's really where employees kind of need that advocacy and that liaison. So what we find is that it's the smaller number, but they tend to take more time. That will be more handled by that liaison and advocacy.
So Blair, for
Yeah, please.
example, pregnancy, childbirth,
Right.
very straightforward, a beginning and an end,
Right.
probably easily handled by central HR.
Absolutely.
More difficult would be someone who is diagnosed with intermittent migraines. You don't know when they're going to happen. It can be for one day, it can be for 5 days. Eventually, you need to start getting into more serious medical interventions and questions and all that sort of stuff. That's where you would go external.
Correct, sir.
Is there
Yeah.
another
No,
example
exactly
like
right.
that? Or
No, it is. It's those situations that have kind of clean time periods because they're very event specific, as opposed to the things that are more intermittent. They come up, they require some more time, and you're right, they flare up, and sometimes they need some attention. And in both cases, we benefit from the experts at FMLA Source, but certainly in terms of kind of helping with employee advocacy, and to answer your question, Councilman Nowakowski, it's really about making sure that we have someone that can kind of shepherd those things through in those questions.
And from the perspective of the employee, so let's take the migraine example. The migraine flares at 4 a.m. I'm not in today.
Right.
Who do you call? Well, with this, you call that number
24/7.
24/7 as opposed to, do I call my supervisor now? Do I call them later? I'm not capable of calling them later. The supervisor wonders, where's the employee? So from an employee perspective, we think in those cases, it gives us a better than if we were purely internal.
Accidents on weekends, you're right. I mean, life doesn't always happen between, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, so absolutely.
So how many cases did we actually experience last year with?
We have
the
several
FL?
thousand cases from my review of some of the information, with more than about 12,000 employees that annually have eligibility to FMLA. It's tied to length of service and hours that you work. We have a fairly inline utilization with other public sector employers, a little higher than some of our benchmarks, but several thousand cases. But again, the vast majority of those are kind of the ones that are the more pregnancy related, or you break an arm, you have something that's more finite as opposed to the intermittent leave, and there are several hundred of those, sir.
So then that price per employee, $1.38, that's for the 12,000, not just the 2,000,
Exactly.
right?
Correct, sir. Yes. So the price that's quoted is a per employee per month price based upon per employee of eligible employees for FMLA, and doesn't have any kind of link to type of case, any kind of incentive or disincentive or correlation to that, and which is the cleanest process and kind of is how insurance plans, if you will, are kind of priced in that way. And then we benefit from the services of the organization based upon that pricing.
So we're looking at a 5-year contract at $197,000 and for per year, and I guess.
Correct, and we would, as I understand, we
And the
would write it as
total
a
about-
3-year contract with 2 1-year extensions as your standard.
Okay,
That's how
and
we
then the
approach
total
it.
would be about 987,000, and plus on top of that, is it $1.38 per employee?
No, that is that
That's-
price.
that's the price. All right.
Inclusive, correct, sir.
Perfect. All
That's
right,
inclusive.
Thank you. Councilman, other questions or
That's it.
comments? Now, the centralization.
Yes.
That has already taken place?
It is.
And
It's
how
already in
long
place.
have we been in a centralized model?
Well, I think you moved in December, November, December of 2015. And what we've done in the kind of the meantime is we've continued to work with departments when there's questions, because we really didn't want to staff up, obviously. We wanted to keep the positions that were moved to HR as vacant positions until we came back to this committee and made a decision. So what we'll do is, obviously, the most important thing for us is we didn't want to displace anybody. So those positions sit vacant, and the value of those positions would be then used to compensate the vendor for those services. And we'll continue to have that small group, those 3 employees centralized in HR that work with the vendor, work with the departments.
It's been a pretty short period of time, but have you seen any changes in utilization rates since this has been centralized?
Yeah, I don't know that I've
The
got
rolling backward year, the rolling backward year is probably the bigger impact
probably the bigger splash.
immediately, which means instead of January 1, start your eligibility all over, it's always from 365 days ago till now. That was a
Yes.
big change.
That was a very big change, and and frankly, it went really well. I mean, there was good communication, lots of advanced communication. It certainly does tend to kind of change your numbers drastically because it's a dropping the line and then changing that process. But I also think that we have certainly seen a greater ability. Maybe not so much in utilization, but our focus has been consistency. And so doing some across the city and being a little more uniform about that. Where it was decentralized, it was different departments, I think doing their best, but certainly doing things differently. And this has probably improved that consistency and fairness. And that's probably the early indicator that I would report on.
Great, great. Well, I'm very pleased with where you've come out. It makes sense. I think it's going to be providing good service to the employees, but then also the city will enjoy some savings.
Yep.
And potentially there could be more.
Potentially
Yes.
more, that's right.
We would hope, and I think it's been a real testimony to working in partnership with our labor unions, because we wanted to find something that would feel good and at the same time it be responsible in terms of an employer and save money, like you say, but also not cause disruption in the departments and make this transition as smooth as we can. So, definitely.
Great. Well, with that, I would entertain a motion.
A motion to approve staff recommendation.
Do I have a
I'll second. Thank you for all your hard work on this.
Thank you, sir.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just a comment, I just really want to thank you for reaching out. I know there were some concerns with some of our employee unions that were just concerned about that customer service.
Yes.
That they were afraid that they're going to be calling someone from a different state and that they wouldn't have that response. And especially for those special cases like this city manager was explaining to us. It's really taking that Team Phoenix approach, working together and coming up with that hybrid solution. So thank you for your hard work and bringing everyone together. Appreciate it, thank you.
All right, with that, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, now we will go back in order to item 3, which is our, this is the key economic indicators report. And this information is given, I'm sorry, it's item 4. It's December 15 and January 16 key Phoenix economic indicator reports. And I encourage the folks who are at home to go online, check out this information. I want to thank the city manager. I think it was last year that you started to provide these economic indicators to us. And if you look at them, if folks go online and look at them, there's a lot of good news in there. Councilman Waring.
Thank you. So I just had, I don't know who I would, is Mario here or? Oh, he is, okay, yeah. So I just had a couple questions.
We have Mario, if it's about streets planning items, but Rick Freese is the deputy budget director. He's here on.
I was looking at a few of these charts and I was just
Okay.
gonna say if a conclusion I drew is
Why don't you
accurate.
we'll ask them both to come
Why
up.
don't you both come on
So
down?
on the water, on page 16, the water services accounts.
Yes.
The blue line, which is current, looks like it dropped. And that's not, that's how many we have, right? So it's gone down a little bit,
Correct.
right? So then, multifamily units permitted is going up. Not as rapidly as the prior year, but it's going up fairly substantially, it looks like. And then, I'm sorry, there was another one I was going to tie in here that I'm not immediately seeing. But on contracting, it looks like it's still going up. So I guess I'm curious.
Are you on
Does that
total
mean
value of
on
permitted
page
activity?
21? So the first one I mentioned was on page 16, the second one is on the bottom of page 17, the third one, the contracting, city sales tax is on page 21. So I guess my question is, it looks like, what would prompt water service accounts to go down? Is that people selling their houses but then nobody moving in?
Well, it looks, so if you, it's over a 3-month period, so September, it went up slightly into October and down slightly in November, although over the year it's still higher. I think,
It looked, to me, it looked like it was a little bit lower, but I don't
sorry.
mean to be, I mean, just the way I'm looking at it's close.
right. So the blue line shows in September, from September to October, it went up slightly. From
Right.
October to November, it went down slightly. But over the total current year to date over prior year to date, it's still up by about 1,500 accounts. But so I'm not
The year,
sure.
but the graph doesn't show the year.
Right. The graph is showing a month-to-month
Right,
change,
right.
but it's an interesting question to find out what would it account for
It just
a
seems like that shouldn't
decrease.
go down.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, it just doesn't. Now, you've got multifamily units permitted going up substantially. Does that mean people are moving from houses to apartments, which could also indicate something about how much people are making? That's kind of a broad statement, but, I'm looking at one line going up pretty substantially and one kind of trending downward, which could or could not be worrisome. And then I'm looking at the contracting going up on a pretty steady line, not as steep as it was in the peak year, but certainly to the recent comparable 3-year average and the prior year to date on page 21. I guess what I took away from this is maybe we're still growing, but it's people moving into apartments. And that people, the city sales tax we're getting from contracting is from people building apartments, which has some implications. I mean, I know multifamily has been up. Is any of the conclusion I'm drawing there? The water service accounts going down was the most, I thought, a little bit worrisome. Some of this seemed a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So I think you guys are not. Maybe you don't have any broad conclusions.
I think we need to really dig into that question a little more with Alan
Right?
and see what's going on.
And with water services.
If you don't have an answer right now,
Yeah. Yeah. But I understand
okay, you understand kind of what
those,
I'm in.
the ties and how we would ask to explain that, yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
think I'm good. Maybe they'll come back with an answer. Or they can just, if you guys can just
Yeah,
come back to
we'll
me,
come
and then if
find
you
it.
want to share with
Mhm.
everybody else, that's fine.
Great, no, good questions that were asked. And one thing I would just comment on for everyone watching, new home construction permits issued is up 73.8%. We're still, fairly early in the year, but up 73.8% as opposed to the prior year. That's very encouraging. And like I said, as you dig through these numbers, you will see several very encouraging numbers. So again, thank you to staff for providing this information to the community and putting it together in one place.
And again, if I could just say, again, that jives with the chart on page 21 about the increase in city sales tax for contracting. But it doesn't seem to make sense when you look at the decline in how could we be having more houses but fewer water service accounts?
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would say
That
on
just
that
doesn't
is,
seem to-
well, yeah, except these are permits
Permits.
issued. So this is right in the beginning.
So
But
permitting
some
would-
of them would have been.
Let's-
Permitting
Yeah.
would be a leading indicator of
Right.
what's going to be probably 6 months
No,
from
I understand,
now.
but I mean, it just seems like over a 3-month period.
The question might be to go back 6 or 9 months, whatever the lead time is from a permit to a water account, and see if this tracks with whatever was going on with permitting 9 months ago. And that's, we'd have to ask.
Because I mean, I've had friends build
Those guys.
houses and be in them in 3 months. I mean, you can do it if you really want to, focus on that. So, okay.
One additional clarification, as you look at the city sales tax for contracting, the chart actually shows a year-to-date total, and so that's going to be going up every single month, no matter what amount is collected in the next month. Assuming it's more than $1, it's going to go up.
Okay, so it's not a month to month.
It's a year-to-date,
Cumulative,
exactly.
yeah.
So it's a cumulative. But if you actually look at the comparison to the prior year, it's down 19%. So that's more reflective, not necessarily of the activity, but changes in state law to how contracting sales tax is collected.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, great questions. Anything else on this item? All right, well, thank you. Thank you for your time on this. And that takes us now to item 5, which is the office space study update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tony
That's one I've been
Macaron
waiting for.
has.
Uh-oh, you're in trouble.
Tony Macaron has taken the lead from my office in several of the immediate projects. We initially did this, we wanted to update you on the moves into this building because they're happening as we speak. But then with the budget conversation last week, several members of council raised the question of, well, where are we with property sales generally? And since this committee has been fully hands-on in that subject for the last 3 years, we wanted to come back and talk more about that. And Chris Mackey from CED has the part of our portfolio where we actually RFP out downtown buildings. So with that, Tony?
Great. Thank
And
you, Ed.
Chris.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gates and subcommittee members. So as you know, we have come to the subcommittee a few times now to talk about the citywide office space study. And the goal is to take a look at citywide office space and see if it's being utilized to its fullest extent. As you are aware, the HR building is one building that we identified that was not being utilized to its fullest extent. And it's a 58,000 square foot building with 6 floors and a basement. The debt on that building is $2.2 million, and we expect to pay that off with the sale of the building. We also expect $400,000 in annual savings, and that's for maintenance and other things like that that we will no longer need once we sell the building. And we'll have a $220,000 one-time savings, and that's attributed to the telephony project. We won't need to do rewiring on that building. We are in the full implementation stage with the HR move. So I call it putting all of our puzzle pieces together. And we are making good progress. We have had many different departments clearing out space because the goal is we are moving the HR employees over to the Calvin Good building on the 1st, 3rd, and 7th floors. So you will see all of these puzzle pieces that take place moving staff to other locations to make this happen. The most recent move is EOD came over and joined the city clerk department on the 15th floor of City Hall. They just arrived on Monday, and that move went very well. So we moved city clerk employees to one side of the 15th floor, and EOD is now on the other side of the 15th floor. And they were here Monday, and everything is going along very smoothly with that. And what happened with that move is now it enabled the construction to begin on the Calvin Good building. So on Monday morning, construction began. They were tearing down walls and getting everything ready on the 1st, 3rd, and 7th floors in order to welcome the HR employees to the building in June of 2016. So in conjunction with all of the moves, we also have a two-phase process, an RFQ and an RFP to sell the HR building, and that's what Chris will update you on today as well.
Good afternoon, Chairman and council members. As you'll recall, approving for us a number of months ago, the HR building will be disposed of in a two-phase process. The first was through a request for qualifications, which is currently opened. It opened on March 1st and it closes on April 14th. We have had our pre-proposal conference and had a number of individuals attend the pre-proposal conference. Out of the request for qualifications, we will then write the request for proposal, which is scheduled to go out on May 2nd, and then be back before, ready to be reviewed by the committee in mid-June. So we will be planning on bringing a proposal forward to this body after your summer break, most likely in either late August or early September.
So that's the update on the HR process, and as Ed mentioned, we are getting a group together, so CED, Finance, Real Estate will be back to you for your April subcommittee meeting to talk more about the city-owned property, taking another look at that list and making some more recommendations as far as properties that can be disposed of. That's our report for today.
Wonderful. Well, yes, very timely after our recent council meeting asking about this. Any questions or comments? Councilor Nowakowski.
Just making sure this is in my district, and one of the problems we have in downtown is parking. So there is a parking solution in the RFP and RFQ, right?
Chairman, Councilmember Nowakowski, as we move forward with this, in the RFQ, we did identify the fact that this building does not have any parking. In the RFP, they will be required to bring back a solution for that parking as per the direction from council at our meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, no, not asking for any action here on this item, but thank you for the update, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Great, thank
I
you.
just want to thank the committee because this is, while there's no action here, this is a result of the action you've taken. So this direction to really assess all of our assets has led us to do something that nobody ever thought we'd do, which was why would we ever sell the HR building? But the underused asset is actually this building. And that's why we wanted to fully use this building and see what that freed up. And with your direction, we're going to move forward on the HR building.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next is item 6, annual user fee report or review.
Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee, I'm just going to turn it over to Greg Holmes, a senior auditor and user fee expert who manages this project. And he has a short presentation and will be available for any questions you might have.
Good afternoon.
afternoon.
So each year we perform this project and we present to the subcommittee in March. We start about mid-fiscal year where we gather revenues and expenses from about 9 departments, about 45 different fee areas related to user fees. And the user fees are really services that benefit a particular subgroup, either of residents or businesses. These relate to general funded user fees. So water and aviation and other enterprise funds are not included in this process. They have their own separate rate setting process that we periodically review. So in looking at those 9 areas, these are the departments, and this is the revenue streams from each of the departments. And you'll see at the top, planning and development being the largest that we look at. It's the only one that's the entire department's costs matched up against their revenue stream of user fees. The rest of the departments, it's a subset of the department. Like fire, the next one down, is only 3 fee areas, and emergency transportation makes about 90% of that revenue stream. All the way down to street transportation at the bottom, which is really just a portion of their central records dealing with reprographics and public record requests. So it's just a small group. When we look at the 45 fee areas, what we've distilled down here is the 10 areas that have greater than $100,000 of under recovery. So some of it's historic, so it's nothing new this year. There really isn't anything that jumped up this year as opposed to what it's been the last few years. What this represents at the top, you look at the top one of emergency transportation, the first figure you see in the middle is the amount of revenue we project for the next fiscal year. And then on the far right is the figure just over $1 million of under recovery. And you'll see the key at the bottom of this is it's tied to a percentage of under recovery. So that $1 million is approximately 5% of the total cost to perform that service. All the way down, and these are in rank order, you'll see all the way down in swimming pools at the bottom, you'll see $768,000 in revenue and then about $6.4 million in unrecovered expenses. And that represents about 90% of their total costs.
So let's explain this chart just a little bit, right?
Okay.
And it's a little bit hard to see. So it's not that they're all the same amount of money, it's just showing relatively how much of that is not recovered. So emergency transportation collects $34.7 million, and they have $1 million of unrecovered costs. Down to the bottom, second from the bottom, Pueblo Grande collects $62,000 in emissions. Their total costs would be $350,000, so there's $290,000 unrecovered. Is that right?
Correct.
So theoretically, Pueblo Grande would have to charge some astronomical admission fee to fully recover their costs. And it would probably be so high that no one would go there.
There's really a separate story with each of these fees. Like emergency transportation at the top, that fee's set annually by the state. We're typically trying to catch up to costs from the prior year when they set their fees. Down to the ones at the bottom that were mentioned before, it's a very market-driven. You're really hamstrung by really what you could charge to really get customers to take part in whatever service that is, like swimming pools. So our purpose today really is just review and discussion. Like I said, this is an annual process that we're just presenting the outcome.
And just before we get into the discussion, just to be clear, you don't have any recommended user fee increases today?
We don't, as policy for city auditor, recommend anything. It's really just, we provide the information back to the departments, and in discussion between the departments, BNR and city management, they might bring forward a recommendation, but we do not.
Okay, that's a good clarification.
So from management at
yes.
this point, we do not believe that that there's anything where it is really worth the effort or it's economically feasible to recommend a fee increase. So for example, Pueblo Grande, somebody's not going to pay $28 to get into Pueblo Grande. I'm not sure if that's the amount that would take to get that. And so Pueblo Grande ends up being really a service to the community. It's an amenity, it's a historical artifact that we make available to the public. We try to recover a little bit through entrance fees, but clearly the point for the city is to make Pueblo Grande available to the public broadly, as opposed to covering all the costs. It wouldn't be feasible. And so at this point, given this list and the amount and the effort it would take to raise the fees, we do not recommend a fee increase as part of the budgetary process.
Thank you. And just a little bit of historical basis for this. Back about 2010, 2009, 2010 period, we had just a drip, drip, drip of user fee increases that were coming to the council. And in that environment, it was really overwhelming for our residents and for us as elected officials. So we said, we all worked together and said, hey, let's unify this. Let's have you all look at this at once and then come to city management. And then from there, come to us with any recommendations. So I'm pleased to see that we're continuing that approach. And by the way, it's at the same time as the budget process. So it makes a lot of sense, just for folks who are wondering why we're having this discussion in this presentation today. So with that, do my colleagues have any questions or comments about what's been presented to us? All right. Again, this is another one of these where I would encourage our viewers to go online, go on phoenix.gov and see, which particular items are being basically operated at a loss. In other ways, we can phrase it as being subsidized, but that's a great example you use of Pueblo Grande. But there's some very interesting information in here in attachment A, which gives a great perspective on things. I did have one question on Councilman Waring's favorite topic on golf.
I was gonna say, you guys have heard all before, I wasn't gonna say anything. It's getting better.
Okay.
There, did I steal your thunder? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, you did. No, I was going to ask questions, but
Credit where credit is
but
due, it's
w-
getting better.
is Councilman Waring accurate in what he's saying, and maybe specifically, maybe you can just address that a little bit, because there has been a real effort made by the Parks Department to address the deficit that we were running in the municipal golf operations.
As far as year to year, it is looking up. Revenue is up $650,000, our projections this year over last year, and expenses are down a little over $500,000. A lot of that deals with landscape maintenance. I'm not sure whether there was a renegotiation of a contract, but that's significantly down. So the overall cost recovery is up from 68% last year to 82%. And just a caveat on when we look at the cost model, we do full costing. So we include indirect costs and overhead. That a lot of the time when you're looking at these in terms of go away costs and whether you should do it or not, that's not included. So our recovery will represent usually a lower figure than what you may see in other studies that don't include that and just go away cost.
So the subsidy on golf used to be, or the charge used to be over $2 million a year budgetarily, different from how they calculate it. Budgetarily, we were $2 million a year from the general fund. Budgetarily this year now it's about $450,000. So I think it's both what Greg said, the efforts to run the golf operations in a more business-like fashion, which has increased revenue, and the outsourcing to a professional sports management company, OB Sports, has reduced expenses, and those two things have done what he said is changed it from a 68% to an 82% recovery. And it's actually, after emergency transportation, it's our highest revenue area on this list.
Well, thank you for your work and the work of Parks Department in addressing this. Councilman Waring.
And I would not have butted in, except you so callously referenced me that I had
did.
to,
I
to the
did.
horror of our colleagues,
I
were like,
did.
oh, not the golf thing again with the city. So it is but it's not a revenue generator in that it's still being subsidized by the general fund. Because that last comment made it sound like we're making money, and we're still not making money on operation.
We're not making money, but I think, so I look at it sort of like Pueblo Grande or like swimming pools. It's recovering more of its, on this list, it's the third highest recovering operation we have of services.
And that's
what this
parks
chart
items
shows.
too. That is not solely golf up there.
No, that line is only golf.
Even though it says park/golf,
Right.
that is just golf.
It's just communicating that golf is part of the parks
Okay.
operation, sort of like parks, Pueblo Grande is in parks,
Not
and swimming
swimming
pools are in parks, yeah. Right.
Okay.
Still losing money, just losing less. And we could put that on a bumper sticker or something.
Be 0%.
Why not?
Or
Maybe.
maybe it costs us less than swimming pools. That'd be a bumper sticker I'd put up there.
All right.
Are we going to debate the merits of swimming pools and golf? This is why
I
they got
leave
the
that to
horrified
you.
look on the face when he brought up the golf in the first place.
I did. I take the blame for
You
that.
do, yeah.
I couldn't help
You
myself.
got to own it, Bill.
I think it's one of the big victories of our city. I think the golf program and what you've been able to do, city staff, public-private partnerships, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up GCU and Maryville Golf. I think it's a great story to tell, frankly.
And ASU, right?
Yeah, ASU and
Papago.
Papago, absolutely.
I hate to be difficult. It would have been a greater story if we would have started this track.
I think we just got to
17
get
years
Councilman
earlier.
Waring out on the course and
Maybe I'll be more relaxed.
Night golf is coming, right?
Yes, night golf at Palo Verde.
That's right, yeah.
Councilman Valenzuela and I've had the opportunity to participate in the past. And having played, to echo your comments and follow up on them, Councilman Valenzuela, I've been out there to the Grand Canyon Golf Course at Maryvale, and it is a great golf course, and would encourage folks to get out there. Not as good as Cave Creek in District 3, but it's outstanding.
Milkshakes, right?
And great milkshakes, absolutely. All right, anything else on this item? All right, thank you for your work on this, really appreciate it. And we are just zipping right along here with the agenda today, so that takes us now to future agenda items, if I'm not mistaken. And any future agenda items from my colleagues? All right. We have, you can rest assured, we've got plenty of good items coming in the future, including the office space review
And telephone.
and
is
telephone.
Next month, that will be the big item, yes.
Okay, that will be. And as far as call to the public is concerned, we have no cards for call to the public. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, sir.